Great. All right. Well, hey, welcome, guys. Today we're going to talk about living from your sweet spot. I'll be honest. Originally, I created the webinar and called it "Finding Your Sweet Spot," and then I've been working on a cohort to launch next year, which we'll talk about at the end. I changed it because it's really not just about discovering who I'm called to be. Like for any of us, I think discovering who I'm called to be is one thing. Actually living that out is what I really want to do, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about kind of three big components of that. But yeah, so we'll jump right in. Um, all right, so when we talk about living from your sweet spot, uh, this is where I like to begin. This is we're going to build what we call a value vitality matrix, which is about where you find joy and how you make an impact. Okay. And so, if we're going to talk about living from our sweet spot, it's this is a conversation about calling, about doing what I'm meant to do. And so, there's a way to figure out, kind of locate for myself, where am I in that currently? And so, if we build this matrix here, left to right is low to high value. And what we mean by that is like, am I making the most of what I've been given? So sort of like a Matthew 25 parable of the talents sort of question. Like, am I generating value with the skills, talents, and time that the Lord has given me? And our world likes to measure that in money. So if you're thinking about your own work or your own daily life and you're going like, I feel like I'm not making as much money as I should. That might be an indication here that that maybe you're lower than you expect. But it's not just about money. Um, when like if you I know when we first had kids, my wife decided to exit the workplace while they were young, and we had a conversation about like what is the financial value of the care she gives them. It's astronomical, right? Like we couldn't pay someone to care for our children the way she does. And so, similarly for me, like during that period, I started taking an extra day off per week to be able to kind of to do that. And so, like how we make an impact in the world, the value we contribute to the world isn't just financial. So that's the left right value. It could be money, but it's value overall. And then the up down in this matrix is about vitality. So it's about joy. How much joy am I getting out of my living? And so, do I wake up excited every day, or am I dreading the tasks that are in front of me? Right. And so we label these four zones. The bottom left we call the job zone. So it's like low value, low vitality. Probably when you were in high school, this is the first job you had. It's like, I mean, I'll do it because it's a paycheck, right? But it's not I'm not using the fullness of my gifts, and I'm never really looking forward to it. I'm just kind of doing this because we have to do something to survive. So that's the job zone. Then high value, low vitality. We call that the career zone. The career zone. And so this is where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe I'm well compensated. Maybe I feel like I'm making a big difference, but it drains me. And I have to be really intentional about not burning out and stuff like that. Then high vitality, low value. We call that the hobby zone. So this is like the examples I like there are a lot of people. I think it's there are a lot of people in our world today who will take a hobby and turn it into a business, but they might not ever actually figure out whether they're making money because they just enjoy doing it. And like people will turn their hobby into a job, and so that could be your life. It's like your life is basically a hobby, right? And then the top right zone, high vitality, high value, we call that the vocation zone. Vocation zone. And so again, here the value isn't just financial, but a lot of times that's how we measure value. But the value is impact in the world, making the most of what I've been given, and and then I'm finding joy in it. I'm looking forward to it. I feel fulfilled in it. We'd all dream to be in that top right quadrant. And that's where vocation actually comes from the Latin vocare, which is to call. So when we talk about calling and vocation, those are like in a lot of ways the same word. And so I know sometimes people will use vocation to talk about their job. For myself, I now talk about I have an overall vocation. Within my vocation, I have an occupation, which I think of my occupation as my like what I do for work to make a paycheck. And so really when we talk about living from your sweet spot, we want to help you live into the fullness of that calling. And I have a Lutheran background. Each of you do too. But I have a Lutheran background. In Lutheran doctrine, the doctrine of vocation is very important to how we talk about spiritual formation. And so it really is about that sum total of all of your roles and how they come together for you to live the life you're called to live. Um, does that make sense? What do you like about kind of organizing it this way? We're going to do a double click on this tool on the next slide. But what's something you like about just thinking about these four quadrants?
I like, Jacob, how you talked about vocation and under that is occupation,
Hmm.
right? I think we often think of it more just like this is my job, period.
Hmm.
And there's no more to it. And so there's a lot of thought in, like, I'm still processing through that,
Yeah,
but there's a lot to process in that.
sure. Great.
Mhm. Yeah, I like the difference between like a hobby and a vocation too. Like what you're doing has either low value or high value.
Yeah.
But then also that your vocation and calling and everything and how that differentiates from just a career, like in the regular world.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So on the next slide, we get pictures for all of this stuff. And so again, on the bottom left, that job zone is represented by a traffic cone. Like you're just putting out traffic cones. For most people, that's a job that's gonna an occupation that's gonna land them in the job zone, right? Bottom right is a necktie. Think the like I always think of a friend of mine who was a vice president for SunTrust Bank. He got laid off in the 2008 financial crisis. He cast about trying to figure things out. Then they rehired him a couple of years later. He was a vice president again for SunTrust Bank. Then they laid him off again. And I think about like for him, it was like, yeah, he was making a lot of money, but that was not a happy period in his life. Later in his life, he just decided to start being a painter for hire. He started painting houses. Formerly a VP of SunTrust. So career zone, that's what I think when I see the necktie. And then sunglasses up here in the hobby zone, sailboat in the vocation zone, right? Sailing through life. So um, this is just a way to begin to reflect on where am I in my life currently. So I wonder for you all, is where would you say, how are you feeling right now? Kind of when you take life in the aggregate, how are you feeling? Is that an easy question to answer or a difficult question to answer?
For me, it's just being honest with myself, like where I want to be versus where I think I am right now.
Okay, yes. And we talked about that a little bit a couple weeks ago. So you don't have to share now
hmm
if you don't want to. Yeah. 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 So yeah, you're saying what's hard is like I could give the answer that I want to give, or I could give the answer that's true. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah. Cool. So what I would say is like what I like about this tool is so like you were saying, Andy, like before I reflect on this, I might think I'm doing better than I am. I might think I have more joy than I do. I might ascribe more value to my work before I really think about it. What I like
hmm
about this is if we're able to be honest with ourselves about where we are in a grid like this, moving up and to the right, and this is what I like about any matrix, can be boiled down to just two things. So sometimes when we think about, am I living into my calling, that question feels too big and too overwhelming, right? But if we just boil it down to like, what would cause me to have more joy in my life? and what would cause me to feel like I'm creating more value. And that's where I think for some of us, creating more value doesn't just mean getting a raise or making more money. For some of us, creating value might mean finding a local organization to contribute to, or like the example I used earlier, spending more time with my kids, right? That might actually help me move right on a grid like this. Or what moves up, like it's not always about, so a lot of times when we talk about living into my calling, doing what I'm called to do, we end up just talking about finding the right job. But if our vocation is an aggregate of all of our roles, we can increase the joy in our life by adding in a role. So maybe I develop a hobby more, or maybe I discover a like prioritize spending time with the people who pour into me, and that can increase my vitality. And so those two things, like we can boil down these big questions to two things. I think I'm getting echo off of one of you, and Andy, it might be you because Regina's muted. Um, so 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 what I like about any matrix is we can boil down complex issues to just two factors. And then for our life of calling, it's like, yeah, it's really overwhelming to think about, am I doing what I'm called to do? Um, but when we boil it down to how can I create more value? How can I find more joy? Right? Okay, so that's kind of a place to begin. Now, I that this term that I talked about with the webinar, living from your sweet spot, this term sweet spot is a very specific term for me from some curriculum I use called Life Unique. So that last graphic we just looked at, I pulled from the Unique curriculum. And so I didn't create these resources, but I've been trained in them. And so we're going to look at a Venn diagram here. So when we say living from your sweet spot, here in the resources that I use, that sweet spot is the overlap of your passion, ability, and context. So your passion, your ability, and your ideal context. When we can dial in those three things, we begin to get clarity on who am I called to be? Who has God made me to be uniquely? Okay, so we'll talk about each of the three of these. And I see you're both taking notes. So that's great. You can be participating in reflecting on this if you feel like you have the capacity for that. So the first one is, what am I most passionate about? And so when I'm working through this tool set with people in a full sense, like so we use this curriculum deeply in my congregation, and we do it as 2 weekend retreats. And so the first weekend is basically all about finding your sweet spot. So we have lots of different tools that we use to help people answer the question, what am I most passionate about? Just highlighting a couple of them here. One, and so for each of these circles, I'll kind of highlight a way you can look inward to answer the question and a way you can look outward to answer the question. So looking inward is looking at your life's storyline. So there's like actually a big robust tool we use where you map the story of your life and name the big chapters. And what we're doing when we use that tool is we're allowing you to look at what's the story that God has been writing through your life. And in particular, we're looking at the high points and hard times, and we're looking at the lies that you're tempted to believe and the truth that you've developed, like the hard-won truths that you found in your life. And so, somebody who trained me said the high points in our life determine our confidence, but the low points in our life develop our convictions. So looking back at your life, about the lessons you've learned in your life, the big themes that God has developed in your life, can allow you to kind of unearth some of that passion. And that's an inward journey. Looking outward, there's a tool we use called Passion 360, and it's actually pretty simple, but can be really insightful. The way we do it when I'm leading a group through is like you send a text message to 12 people, like 4 family members, 4 friends, 4 coworkers, or other. and you ask them, you say, hey, if you had to just use 3 words to describe what I'm passionate about, 3 things I'm passionate about that you have to state in 1 word each. So, like it's like one time somebody sent this text and the person sent back like a 3 word sentence, like loving others well. No, it's like 3 different things. Give me 3 things I'm passionate about, 1 word each. And it's really fascinating when you ask, so that 360 is a 360 degree. You're looking all around yourself. What do the people outside of me say that I'm passionate about? And what's really beautiful about that is you're getting you're getting an objective look at who you are and how you live. Because it's these people around you who see in your life what you're most passionate about. And so that can help clue you in to some of the things that are important to you. So that's passion. That's passion. What am I most passionate about? Ability is answering the question, what can I do best? What do I do best? This is about the skills and talents, competencies, perspectives, style that God has given you. Um, so one of the questions that's actually one of the ways to help people think about their ability that I've really come to love is this sense of accomplishment. Um, so it's reflecting on what are some of the things I've done in my life that give me a sense of accomplishment. And maybe these are things you got recognition for, but they don't have to be, and often they're not. So it's like nobody else has to recognize that you did this, but you know you did it, and it makes you feel proud. And so, like for me, I talk about a woman who was I led the planting of a church, so I'm a church planter, and there was a woman who was a part of our church early on who had been in traditional, had like a traditional Episcopal upbringing, been in traditional churches her whole life. She was in her 70s by the time I met her, and she was like I met her through a nonprofit in town. We were on a board together, and she said, "Well, I'm not going to come to your church." Just because I do traditional church and you're not traditional, but I think maybe I'll come to your Bible study. I said, that's cool, you know. And this is before we launched worship. So she came to my Bible study and connected with people. And then she was like, okay, maybe I will come to your church. So then she came to our church and she's hung around for 7 or 8 years before she moved out of town to be closer to her kids. And what she told me once over the several years we were in church together was, oh, I've been in church all my life, but it wasn't until I was a part of this church that I really feel like I met Jesus. And I was like, for me, I'm like, that story is a sense of accomplishment story for me. Like I didn't do it, but I feel like God used me in special ways in that person's life, and that gives me a sense of accomplishment. Um, I was working with somebody recently who's a police officer and Army veteran. And when I asked him these questions, his things were things like, well, one time I was driving down the interstate and I saw a car wreck and I ran across multiple lanes of traffic, pulled a woman out of a car and saved her life. I was like, yeah, okay. Like, so his abilities are different than mine, right? So mine is like a slow carrying over several years. His is like in this moment, I know what to do. And so you can see there where we're unearthing kind of our unique differences. But so it can be really interesting to reflect on sense of accomplishment. Looking outward when we talk about ability, this is where personality assessments come in. So in everything that we're talking about, what we're ultimately trying to do is give ourselves language to name who God has called us to be. And so there's like we could do like a whole webinar just on the power of naming. But I say that to say very often we look at a personality assessment and we just take it at face value. What's really powerful is when you're using a personality assessment to review the output of that assessment and look for the language that you can make your own. So very often people will like read over an assessment like, oh, that's great. And then they go into work the next day and try to change something. A better way to do it is to look over that and go like, okay, what if this resonates the most? What am I not sure about? And which pieces of this am I going to claim as language for how God has shaped me? And so my 2 favorite assessments in this category are insights discovery for personality which is a Jungian psychographic profile, introversion, extroversion, thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition. Um, and then the APEST assessment, which is at 5qcentral.com. So those two I feel like really give people a breakthrough in understanding their personality and their wiring. The other thing that's fun that we do with people here is looking at name meaning. Um, so again, I'll think about that person I'm working with currently whose sense of accomplishment was saving someone's life. When we looked at his name meaning, I won't share his name because he's not here and it's his information, but the meaning of his name was like masculine, man, uh, lover of Christ. I was like, oh, like that was his first, middle, and last name. Or like I think no, the first one was like bearer of Christ, manly, son of a man. Like so it's like a manly man follower of Christ is what his name means, you know? And I was like, and his sense of accomplishment is I ran across an interstate and saved someone's life. I'm like, holy moly. Right? So you start to look at these things and it gives you information. And name meaning is one of those that can feel a little woo-woo sometimes, like woo-woo. But when you think about it, like if we believe that words have power and the words we speak have power, if someone's been calling us something our entire life, so like my name is Jacob, Jacob means conniver or schemer. Um, and so if people have been calling me conniver, schemer my whole life, what happens over that time? That's kind of what can happen with name meaning. For me, I am a strategic thinker. I am a schemer. Those things have a negative connotation sometimes. I do all I can to make them positive, right? Um, so that's ability. So passion, ability, and context. So the question of context is where is my impact the greatest? Where is my impact the greatest? So if like how am I leveraging my passion and using my abilities? I could do those two things, but if I'm in the wrong place, it will it will not have the desired effect. Um, so finding the ideal context for us is the third component of identifying our sweet spot. Um, so the looking inward, I just wrote to from. What I mean here is it's so if we think of people, there are certain people to whom God has sent us. So I believe that our God is a sent and sending God. Throughout the scriptural narrative, we get accounts of God moving toward people to rescue in grace. And I believe that as we are captured by the gospel, we too are caught up in God's movement toward creation and toward other people in grace. So the question becomes, what are the unique attributes of the type of people to whom I have been sent? And the way you can think about that is like thinking about on the people you've had an impact on. When you think about like, oh, I made a difference in that person's life. Uh, what are the things that all those people you've impacted that they have in common? What kinds of people? So for me, it's like eager learners. So like I have a strong teaching gift. I like to think deeply about things. Um, what does not work well for me is to if I have to convince someone to want to learn or grow. It's not like which I think there are people who are willing to come alongside come alongside folks who maybe aren't as eager to learn. But for me, it's best if by the time we connect, you're ready to learn. I can just teach. We can just go for it, right? Um, so so that's to whom you're sent. And then the from is it would be like if we're talking about people, it'd be like with whom are you sent? So we you can apply to from to people or places. So what kinds of places am I sent to? And which kinds of places am I sent from? If we're talking places, you can think about where are the places where I recharge and rejuvenate. When we're talking about people, we say to whom am I sent and with whom am I sent? And so that's more like, whereas God is a sent and sending God, God rarely sends people alone. So like even when he's sending the disciples, the minimum number is in twos. So the question is, what kinds of people do I need around me to be most effective? Or like if I am so like when I think about the spaces to which I'm sent, it's like cluttered, disorganized spaces, right? So the places from which I'm sent are calm, organized spaces, right? So like I like my office. I like, I like I like quiet. I like well designed, right? So it's to whom and with whom, or to what places and from what places. That can help you hone in on context. And really, that exercise is sort of looking at context directly. If we look outside of ourselves, this is where the working genius assessment comes in, which I know each of you are familiar with. Um, because and I place, whereas most personality assessments are an ability circle question, what's really special about working genius and what I think people have found really valuable about it is that it's an assessment that helps you understand what context you like to work in, what factors around you kind of maximize your productivity. And so that's a context assessment, the working genius assessment. Um, and then also life stage. So there's a couple of different ways to look at life stage, but understanding like what stage of life am I in allows you to figure out like, is this a time to take a chance in my work or pull back? Is this a time to, like that's another context question. And so, there is a easy way to talk about life stage is child, warrior, chief, and sage. These are like four big phases of life. The child stage of life, the warrior stage of life. That's WARRI, not WORR. The warrior stage, the chief stage, and then the stage of being a sage. So, and those are different phases of life. John Acuff in his book Start has a five-part, like five stages of life, that helps you look at like, is this a time for me to develop new skills and try not lots of new things, or edit down and focus, or maximize after I've edited and focused? So different stages of life. So again, that's passion, ability, context. Um, as I was designing this slide deck, I thought, oh, you could probably write those down and we could just talk about sweet spot right now. But as I'm actually talking through this, I'm like, that might be tough. You were just taking in all that information. But I would say that, like, with that amount of information, you could consider your sweet spot. And usually, like, what it would be is like, you could just answer each of those questions. What am I most passionate about? Kind of make a list or write a couple of sentences. What can I do best? Jot down kind of sense of accomplishment. What are things that you like, if you've done any personality assessments before, what are things that you tend to remember out of those? That gives you like a word bank for ability. And then same thing with context. And like I said at the top, what we're trying to do here is put language, or I said in the middle, what we're trying to do here is put language to our calling. And so it's not a secret that you have to find. It's probably something you're already generally aware of, but you haven't put language to it yet. So, I mean, a very crude and rudimentary way is like build a word cloud of what I'm most passionate about, build a word cloud of what can I do best, and build a word cloud of what's my ideal context. You look at all those and then see if you can just write a sentence. Here's my sweet, like, this is what I was made to do. And excuse me, that's a synthesis step where you're taking those three big word clouds and you're kind of just boiling it down to what feels the most pithy or impactful for you. Um, what we say in the Life Unique process is all Christians have a general calling. And that general calling is to honor God and love others. Okay. And so what we say is like, but you are called to honor God and love others uniquely. And so the form we use when we start talking about sweet spot is Jacob Hoyer exists to honor God and love others by, and then I finish that sentence. The first pass is a two-word calling statement. So, and we use the form blanking blank, verb, noun. So, Jacob Hoyer exists to honor God and love others by inciting clarity. For my wife, Erin exists to honor God and love others by anchoring home. I have a coworker whose two words are she exists to honor God and love others by illuminating paths. Um, uh, Unleashing vulnerability, I think was one of them. Um, like I said, we use this in our congregation. I've walked probably close to 100 people through naming their two words. And then what you do is you can build that into a 12-word calling statement. There's some steps you can take to do that. So my 12-word calling statement is uh, clearing the fog to welcome people in to the beauty of God's next move. So that's what I'm called to do is I'm called to clear the fog uh, by welcoming people into the beauty of God's next move. And so something like that allows you to sort of name your sweet spot. I'll pause there. I've talked a lot. What do you like best? Do I need to repeat anything? Was there something you were trying to grab that you missed? What do you like best about that?
I like the inward and outward perspectives for all the three areas. Like you're not just, it's not just your own insights and perspective, but also the people around you.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Anything else you like best or things I need to repeat or questions?
What did you say was the other assessment besides the APEST for the ability?
Insights discovery. So that particular assessment, if you're interested, talk to me. It's
Okay.
not one you could just get. But if you're familiar with Myers-Briggs or DISC, it's the same psychology. There are lots of reasons why I like Insights the best. Anything else? Any other questions? Anything you like?
I like that it's simple, Jacob. I like a two-word sweet spot, right? Like, and it just really, like, as you were reading yours, but then also other people's, right? You get something out of that, but it's not this, I used 1,000 words to
Hmm.
describe it. It's just really clean and simple. I love that.
Yeah, great, thanks. Yeah, and so that again, the power of naming, I could talk at least half a day about it. But I have a friend who has a background in neuroscience, and I heard her on a podcast once talk about the power of naming. She talked about like in your brain, something doesn't exist until you name it. And so like until it has a name, I can't imagine it. And so like if I told you, there's something in my office, it's rectangular and white, you'd be like, okay. But if I'm like, oh, it's this AirPods case. Like until I named it, you can't imagine it. And I guess I cheated because I showed it to you as I named it. But if I just said it's an AirPods case, you've seen that before. I've named it. Now it exists. Before that, it wasn't a thing. It was just characteristics, right? And so the same thing happens with our calling. So it's like I might have a general sense, but I haven't put language to it. Well, if I haven't put language to it, it doesn't exist in my, I can't evaluate it. I can't I can't like map a path to live into it more fully. And so that's where naming things allows them to have object permanence in our mind so we can interact with them and all of that. So what does that look like? So let's imagine you've named your sweet spot. You're thinking about, okay, now how do I live from my sweet spot? So that's where ultimately this also comes from the Life Unique curriculum. Uh, it's you start to live life in a rhythm, and so the notes I put on the slide are staying true to who you were created to be, who you are created to be, is a question of faithfulness. So this is like I think I use that term because when people think about faithfulness to Jesus, I think the concept of discipline comes in quickly. But we often think about, I think, discipline and faithfulness as being something I do for God. I don't think about it as tending to myself. And so what I'm saying here is like actually living into who you're called to be is the central question of faithfulness. Like God is rescuing all creation. As those rescued by Jesus, we have been deputized into the mission. Our participation in the mission looks like us living out our callings. And so dreaming and planning to live into who I'm called to be is the essential spiritual discipline. I often leverage these concepts when I'm talking to people about developing joy or play in their life. So a lot of folks like I think there's like a positive connotation to saying like, oh, I work so hard in ministry, or I work so hard in mission that I don't even have time to play. Well, that's actually unfaithfulness. Like because Jesus didn't die so you could work hard, right? Uh, you were rescued by the gospel so that you would have life to the full. That life to the full involves joy and happiness, and play. And so all of this living into who I'm called to be is actually the essential spiritual discipline. And so with that in mind, we talk about like daily, weekly, quarterly, annually rhythms. And so daily, I'm allocating my energy and resources. Weekly, I'm reflecting on how I'm stepping into what God has called me to do. Quarterly, I'm setting 90-day goals and planning what that quarter looks like. Annually, I'm retreating to think about the coming year and how I can live more deeply into who I'm called to be. Um, and I almost could have stated those in the opposite order to have them make more sense. So, like for me, I've been blessed that my wife's family has a tradition of going away together for a handful of days between Christmas and New Year's every year. So like since before we were married, so um like over 15 years now, every year I go away for about a week and we spend time with my wife's family. And that's historically has been a pretty relaxing time. So during that time, my wife helps me carve out about 8 hours where I go review the year and think about the year that's coming. That's my annual retreating, and I use unique tools to do it. Um, and during that time, I set a quarterly goal, and then I also calendar when I'll do quarterly planning throughout that coming year. And so once a quarter, I spend about 2 to 4 hours reviewing the quarter and planning the next quarter. And that involves looking at four components: health, love, work, and play. So it's all four: health, love, work, and play. So I'm evaluating progress in those four, we call them storylines. And I'm allowing my evaluation of those four storylines to inform how I set a 90-day goal. Then on a weekly basis, I'm doing about a 10-minute check-in where again, unique tools allows me to check in with myself on health, love, work, and play weekly and think through how I'm accomplishing that 90-day goal that I set out to do. I would say there is no specific tool for daily allocating, but for me, that weekly reflecting, I spend about 10 minutes reflecting on health, love, work, and play, about another 30 minutes just writing down my to-dos for the week and calendaring my week. That weekly rhythm allows me to be more intentional with daily allocating my energy. So that's kind of the mechanics of living from your sweet spot. Um, when we say it all at once, it sounds like a lot, and that's why I front loaded with saying this is a discipline. But really, like I'm sure you've each discovered there are things in your life that can feel like work to get started. But once you're in rhythm, you're like, I don't know how I would live without it. Um, and so that's like for me, when I'm working out 3 times a week, I feel better. This year, I turned 40, so I had some like I tweaked my back a couple of times. I had some like muscle tension issues. So like I got out of the routine of working out regularly. And it was like a couple weeks ago. I was like, oh, I just need to get back to that. So I did last week. Yesterday was Monday. Usually today I would work out. I didn't. And I got to the end of the day, I was like, I'm just kind of feeling tired and gross. I was like, oh, that's right. I need to work out. So I got up this morning and I had to make myself do it. But if I'm in rhythm on it, it's adding value, it's adding energy. It's not work. Or it is work, but it's rejuvenating work. Um, what do you like best about this? This is our last tool. So what do you like best about this?
I'm in the process of doing something very similar to what you have here, of something I went through, but that whole daily, weekly, annually, quarterly, or quarterly, annually. And I think it's just a healthy habit to get into, especially people, I mean, anybody, but like those working in ministry, it can be really easy to put that stuff off, right? And taking care of those things. So then what comes out of you is better.
Hmm.
And so I just love the reminder of that. And I have my notebook actually. It's so funny that I just purchased to like get my
Yes.
life in order.
Yeah.
But it's all these things. And I'm like, okay, Lord, I hear you. I hear you. Right. Like
Yeah.
it's that reminder. So thank you.
Yep. That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts on, we call this a life-making cycle. Any other thoughts on that?
I like how you said like developing joy, or like having play in your life is being faithful still to God, even if it's not work.
Yeah.
Just because I'm kind of in a season of burnout and trying to heal from that and entering a season of rest and like what does that look like? Because I suck at resting. And so like
Yeah.
how can I add more joy or play to my life? And that's not being selfish, it's being faithful.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. That's great. Thanks. So I mentioned to you that so Life Unique, there's like a full process, which is like it's 24 sessions originally designed to be run over 6 to 9 months. We do it as 2 weekend retreats at my church. I've had a couple of people ask me for like, hey, is there any way to just kind of name my sweet spot and get the basics without doing a full process? So I designed something to do next year. So I've designed a 6 session cohort that I'm going to launch in January. So a lot of what we just discussed, we'll walk through it across 6 sessions and allow you to build it out. So like I referenced health, love, work, and play will help you reflect on those and set a goal, but beginning in sweet spot. So you'll interpret the story of your life, go over the ability circle, uh, think about not just what you're called to do, but where you're called to do it. That's the context. And then kind of we'll tee up, we'll give you the pieces you need to step into that life-making cycle by talking about health, love, work, and play, evaluating your roles, and then helping you set a 90-day goal. So we'll do that across 6 live Zoom sessions. We'll record if you miss. You'll get the tools and documents you need to walk this stuff out. I'll deliver the training and facilitation. And then also I'm doing like a 1 hour call like 90 days later, like to check in and help you reset. And it includes that insights discovery assessment I mentioned, as well as APEST and Working Genius. Those will be included in the cohort, which you each have Working Genius already, so you wouldn't need that. But uh, so I'm planning to do this on Tuesday nights at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, starting January 6th. So if you're interested, look at claritynavigator.com/events. Um, my goal is 8 people. So if you know anybody else, just send them to claritynavigator.com/events or have them email me, jacob@claritynavigator.com. I can talk to them about it and stuff like that. Any questions about that? Great. And if either of you want to chat more about any of this, just let me know. I'm happy to chat more. But yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Uh, great.